which is our biggest yet, which is awesome, and a celebration of 5 years of CakePHP, which is all thanks to you guys. So, welcome everyone. Just going to give you an overview of the event, some of the concepts that speakers are going to be talking about, and for those of you that are new to the framework, some nice keywords in here that you'll remember, and just a bit of an overview of Cake. So CakePHP, the talk that I'll be giving this morning is Reimagining CakePHP, discussing some of the motivations behind our move to CakePHP 2.0. So the path to 2.0 and what that means and what that involves. So CakePHP is, as you may or may not know, it's a model view controller based framework, separating out logic to make it easy to implement. Uses an ORM, it's object relational management, mostly object relational management. Allows rapid application development, awesome for prototyping. Do not repeat yourself sort of philosophy, so we only want you to implement things once. I personally don't like repeating myself, so it's a great way to go. It's simple. When looking for a framework, I personally wanted something that was simple, powerful, but flexible. So we maintain this throughout the versions that we have and the versions that we're developing. Conventions-based allows us to assume certain knowledge about developers that are working with it and their business requirements. Assuming conventions and providing those for people that are building with Cake allows us to provide some defaults, like, and you see those as you work with Cake. Makes it much easier to build without having to provide all the options. It's extensible, so you can provide additional functionality off the core. It's secure, providing validation and data sanitization. Scaffolding is it's a prototyping feature, and it's something that's in there. It's very useful to show off very quick, rapid prototypes. Routing, configurable routing is really important for search engine optimization, making the user experience easy. Caching is a big one. Performance is an issue for anyone deploying a website, and the caching mechanisms that are provided are they cover 80%, if not more, of the user base, and it's extensible, so you can provide your own caching as well. API development is a big issue, and it's something that people want to do, and it's something we've targeted for talks for this Cake Fest. So there are going to be some people talking to you about API development, and Cake makes it easy to work with whatever format you want to publish APIs in or consume. Documentation is a big thing. It's something we've been improving over the last few. An official API, so extending our documentation. We've got an API for CakePHP 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and as we come up for new releases, we release APIs for those. So just extending our documentation into an API. The bakery is it's a huge resource. People love submitting articles. There are articles from the core team, articles from users, and comments, and it's a great resource for code, different implementation ideas and techniques. Testing framework. We have a simple test extended testing framework that allows you to quickly and easily build unit tests and ensure your code is working. Free and open source software, it's something that we maintain, something that we enjoy working with and enjoy providing the community. So that's a big thing. And what brings it all together, and it's a talk that's coming up from Larry Masters tomorrow, is it's an awesome, worldwide, energetic community. So with all of that in mind, and there is more to Cake, but with all of that in mind, put all of those together, and that's what essentially makes up CakePHP. So that's just a bit of an overview for the event. So just how many people have been using CakePHP for a while, like a year or so, or more? Cool. And less than a year? That's even better. That's cool. We've got some newcomers, so we like that. So Reimagining CakePHP. It's an interesting title. It's what we want, what we envisage for CakePHP. We don't understand exactly where we want to be yet. We know there's a few issues we have, whether it be speed or optimization techniques. There are a few things that we want to achieve now for our development for 2.0. That evolves and changes, and one of the things we've been discussing lately in the core team is what do we limit that to for our initial release, and what new features do we need to limit that to get that release out. But it is a reimagining, so sticking with those ideas and ideals that I showed you just before, we want to build a better framework, building on the user base we've got, providing all the ease of development we already have. A little bit about myself. My name's Weldon. I'm from Australia. Sorry if you have trouble understanding the accent. Some people do. My website's there, and we've been talking about my official title at the Cake Software Foundation. I decided to pick Jester. So, okay, my personal motivations for this. I love CakePHP. I've been through a couple of frameworks, and Cake wasn't the first one I picked up. It's where I ended up, though, because it worked best for me. It allowed me to build out with conventions, this convention over configuration style, but not be too restrictive, not restrictive at all. I hate doing repetitive code. I want to do it once, have it done, and just include it on future projects. And why I talk to you today and why I've talked to you previously is I'm an educator. I love talking to people and teaching people about technologies that I'm passionate about. And hopefully I teach you something today. So the biggest item, dropping PHP 4 support, which offers huge benefits, speed and ease of use. PHP 4 support we've supported for a long time, and it's been through user requirements. We're trying to follow what users want from their deployment environment. A lot of people using shared servers or low-cost servers don't actually have control over the PHP version that they're using. So for a long time, CakePHP has and still does in 1.3 support PHP 4. That meant that certain workarounds were required to get PHP 5 working in certain ways with a way that was compatible for PHP 4 users. So dropping PHP 4 support and supporting 5.2 and above. Now, the question I'm anticipating from people is, why 5.2 when 5.2 has reached its end of life? And we don't want to just jump to the most current. Jumping to the most current would be great to support the latest current stable PHP, but we've got such a large user base, so many tens of thousands of people out there developing for companies, and they have many sites and legacy code themselves, that we need to move with the user base but push that envelope, push as far forward as we can. So 5.2 and above is the planned support for CakePHP 2.0. Moving to 5.3 at this point would drop out a whole lot of the user base and make migration more painful than it needs to be. There will be a migration process to move to 2.0. It's not a drop-in solution, but if we go to 5.3 only, we lose a lot of those users. So 5.3 only and above will be coming in a future version beyond 2.0. It may be a minor release, a 2.2.x release, but that is coming. Is anyone still using PHP 4? Good, I didn't see any hands. That's excellent. So dropping PHP 4 has allowed us to do a whole heap of things. There was a great, search through the core, look for the PHP 5 constant, because we don't need to check for PHP 5 anymore. We require PHP 5 on CakePHP 2.0. So we dropped the PHP5 constant, and we did a few other optimizations through there. The E shortcut has been removed, and similar. Up and low, those sorts of things. Things that are provided by PHP itself, we've removed the shortcuts for those. So instead of using E, you just use echo. It's fairly straightforward, that one. Unit testing is one of the bigger changes that's happened within the core. We've actually dropped use of simple test in favor of PHPUnit. It's updated more often. It provides a lot of benefits. It's required us to completely rewrite the testing suite that CakePHP offers. PHPUnit has better support for PHP5. Simple test does support PHP5, but to an extent, doesn't provide you with all the niceties that PHPUnit does. The migration for unit tests, for those that are writing unit tests, and who does write unit tests? Who knows about unit tests? Yeah. We have to do something about that. We really, really do. So PHPUnit's more actively maintained, better support for PHP5, and the migration that we've got from our simple test-based unit tests to PHPUnit, it's fairly simple to change across. There's documentation already for that. PHPUnit is easily integrated with systems like cruise control, so continuous integration. Mark's actually doing a talk on unit testing, and we'll be talking about continuous integration. So that'll be coming up, and he'll actually be doing that with PHPUnit to give you an idea of what that involves and what you can do with it. And I believe it was so easy to do that he had to sort of pad out his talk a bit. So it's very, very easy to do. PHPUnit kind of is the de facto standard for unit testing these days. We'll move with the times as they change, but at the moment, PHPUnit's where to go. The installation is easy. If you've got a server, you just install it with pair. It'll become available in your pair includes. So instead of dropping dropping the simple test directory into vendors, you just install with pair. It's just a bit simpler and faster to run unit tests. Mark actually may have some stats, I'm not sure, during his talk about the improvement in speeds, but we can provide you with some of those. So changing to PHPUnit has some costs. Some things have gone, we've got new features, but we've had to drop some things. So no more group tests, but it's not really an issue because you can configure group-like tests with PHPUnit. The mocks are different, but provide much more benefits, and Mark will go into details of that during his talk. Things like start test and end test are deprecated, and this is an example of the sorts of changes that you'll need to make, but it's just a function change. That's how simple the migration is from our simple test-based ones to PHPUnit. And that's about it for the PHPUnit changes. Has anyone used PHPUnit? We've got Mark up the back. Okay. And who's using simple test outside, maybe outside of CakePHP even? Yep. Any other testing frameworks? Is someone using something else? Their own? No. So collections, what we've done is actually rearrange the way things like components and helpers behaviors are organized. Previously, they all worked a little bit differently. So we had the component object within the core, which was not actually a base class for components. It was a holder for the collection of components you were using, whereas the helper class was a base class for helpers. So it didn't actually match up. So there's been some reorganization done there to make that make a little bit more sense and have them all operate in a similar fashion. So if you're familiar with one, you're familiar with the rest. So model behaviors, components for controllers, helpers, and shells are all rearranged to have this collection concept where your behavior is stored in a behavior collection. Components are in a component collection, and so on. SPL is one of the benefits that come with PHP 5. It's one of the things that we can use and assume where we previously could not. So replacing what we can with SPL functionality. SPL is standard PHP library. Provides awesome file and folder stuff. CakePHP was, and I'll say this, it was ahead of its time. It included a lot of functionality that was not in PHP at the time. It was implemented to provide that functionality for users that were not on PHP 5. And we've been able to cut out a lot of that PHP provided functionality as we're moving forward. So using SPL allows us a huge speed increase. We're not re-implementing stuff that's already in PHP, which because PHP is caught up and we've caught up with PHP. Bit both ways. So time to cut the fat. No need to re-implement stuff that's already in PHP, and it's increased performance dramatically. We did some preliminary tests last night. I'm not going to give you the figures. I tweeted, so if you saw it, you can rely on those. But we did some preliminary tests that may or may not be truly indicative of the speed, but it's looking extremely promising. So. Exceptions is one of the big changes coming in. No longer is it the end of the world when you have an error. Cake error is not just going to destroy your life. So more OO, cake error is being removed. It's easier to control, and yeah. Introduction of a request and response object. This is new to 2.0. Modelizing the request, the current request that's coming in. So replacing certain functionality in the controller. Provides a similar functionality to what you see in params. You inspect this object, you can pass it around. It's much more efficient and accessible to deal with the request information and the response that you're going to be sending back. So what you're familiar with request handler and dealing with information that was on params, that's being replaced with these request and response objects. And for backwards compatibility, which is one of our big focuses, array access is there, which means you can access it as an array rather than calling methods on it, which allows us to provide that backwards compatibility with things like params. So any questions before I keep moving on? No. Session handling was one of my issues. I hated the session handling. It was as good as it could be for a while. But we took a look at it, we had a good chance to refactor it and remove some duplicated code and some structure issues that were in the handler. So in 1.3, we removed the inclusion of the session component automatically. It's because not everyone needs sessions. If you need it, it's simple to include, and there's no real performance loss in including it. If you're already doing it, it's an extra bit of text, including session, but you can actually have it not included. That's a 1.3 improvement. And moving beyond that, we plan to modelize data handling. Session information is just data, and it should be modeled like your model saves, for example. So that's something that we're discussing at the moment, something that people may or may not agree with, but we're discussing that and thinking about the changes we can make in that. Access anywhere. So previously the session was almost re-implemented. You had a session helper, a session component, and the cake session. What we've done is refactored it so you've got the core session, which works on different storage mechanisms behind whatever you want to use for session storage. The helper itself just simply passes through to Cake Session. The component passes through. So there's no re-implementation, so that's less code for us to maintain. It's performing better because there's less spaghetti code in there, and we're able to separate out caching and database storage and so forth. The good thing about the way that's done is it's actually backwards compatible. Just simply passing back through to Cake Session and refactoring that. So this is a bit of an example of what it used to look like. Not sure if you can see that or not, but a giant switch statement to determine what you wanted to do with the session, and sort of all that handling code all in one place in the core. It was a bit hard to read through. Refactoring it, the session handler here is Cake Session, and you're able to use whatever storage mechanism you like. Provided by default, you have things like database cache and PHP. You can actually extend that and provide whatever your crazy engine wants to be for session storage, as long as you implement the Cake Session handler interface. So it's completely extensible, where previously it was not quite as easy to do this. In an object-oriented fashion, it's just easy to plug this information in. So that looks a little bit familiar. If anyone's looked at diagrams that I've put up before, blogged about, looks a little bit familiar. It looks like the JavaScript engine that was done for 1.3. It's almost identical. So instead of using the core provided engines, you implement your super engine, but it extends a base engine helper. So slightly different in that one's implementing an interface, the other one's extending a base, but similar to the collections that we've done in rearranging those to all operate in a similar fashion. It's a similar style of approach with the JavaScript stuff and the session handling. Lazy loading. It provides a performance increase so that you're only loading the information you need as you need it. So for associations, as we're doing some testing last night, I believe Mark was saying that you're going to see much bigger performance improvements on larger projects with lazy loading. So if you've got a couple of models with associations, you're not going to see as big improvements as projects with 50 or 60 models that have complex inter-associations. So. So nested objects, so components that have component dependencies, those are lazy loaded, helpers and tasks as well. And it's a nice cheap way to optimize your current code. XML, who uses the XML class like regularly? You poor gentleman. The XML class worked. I think that covers its good points. The XML class worked, but it very much was, and I'm talking in past tense here, and that's a good thing because I do see us moving beyond our 1.x as soon as we can. It did work, but it was very much cake specific. If you wanted to do something beyond cake results, it was difficult. You could do it, but it was difficult. And there's a few tickets that I've been looking at for a long time, and it's just to implement things like ordered nodes in XML was difficult because we didn't have namespace support. So as much as anyone can make XML make sense, we're trying to do it. So what we've got is a wrapper around simple XML, which is part of PHP 5, previously not really available for us to assume. And it just basically allows us to make it make sense. So one of the big things we want and we're trying to do now, we're pushing for, is getting feedback. This is a picture of PHP Matsuri last year. We're trying to reach out to the community to find out what you guys want and what features you want to see and how best we can implement those to meet the needs of the community. It's an 80%, 20% split for what we put in the core. We try and fit 80% of the needs of the developers, and there's 20% left for you guys to build. For those customizations that make your app your own, those aren't generally included in the core unless 80% of people want them. So we need feedback. What do you guys need? What do you guys want? And how can we improve as we move forward for 2.0? So that's the next question everyone's going to have. I can has CakePHP 2.0. Well, no, but kind of, but no. No, you can't have it. There's no release right now. It's on GitHub. Commits are being pushed all the time. So you can grab it now and have a look, have a play. You can build apps on it. I wouldn't deploy on it right now. But we're not really committing to a release date, I guess. I mean, we're still discussing what features will be included in the 2.0 release. So you can jump onto GitHub. There's a branch, there's a 2.0 branch, and there's a few feature branches for it as well. You can follow those commits. There's also a whole bunch of tickets. There's documentation on Lighthouse. There's plenty of information about it out there. If you want to jump in, have a look, see what's happening, and maybe even provide some ideas, suggestions, or write some code yourself. So yeah, to give you an idea of where it is, it's not really beta. I wouldn't really call it alpha. It's not really a dev state either. It's kind of, well, does it run? It depends on what day you catch us on. Good days and bad days. So it's very much a work in progress, but for the most part, relatively stable. So that covers it for me. CakePHP 2.0 and our motivations towards the development we're doing there. Does anyone have any questions about what I've done there, what I've talked about? Yep.
You talked about modelizing the session. Does that mean we'll be able to access session data through the model? Like, is it we're reading data from the database? Is that or is that?
Yep. The question was about modelizing session data. Does it mean we can access session information just as a model and associate that with other models? Yeah?
Like treating it as if it's a data source almost to the model and accessing it through a read collected out model?
Right. It's a point that not the whole team agrees with, and I'm presenting it because it's my talk, so I can say that's happening. The whole team doesn't agree with me. We had a pretty heated conversation while I was in an airport one time. I was tired, everyone was tired. But what I foresee is it is data being stored, right? So what do we do with data when we're storing it and dealing with it, retrieving it? We use a model. That model has a data source. So that data source should be Cake Session. That data source will be configurable in what engine that ends up in. So you end up with a model, which is session. It uses a data source, which is the session handler, which is configurable to say where it's stored. So you can associate your session with other information and do traditional finds on it. Does that answer your question?
I was thinking of like when you store a regular model, one of our the normal models can possibly store it alternatively to a database or to a session instead, and instead of having just the actual session model. So it would be as if a regular model instead is a session model, but would it be any other model we use normally?
Okay. Not something that had sort of entered my thoughts for usage, but something perhaps to discuss as we're disagreeing.
Maybe not extends, but implements.
Yeah. Yep. Any other questions? Yes.
You mentioned collectivizing a number of the core classes. Have you looked into making it easier to collectivize and modifying the view and subclassing now? Basically, making it easier to develop variations on the theme view, that sort of thing.
Okay. I'm not sure that's really entered our minds really. Customizing the view is fairly easy. Subclassing an existing view and using a custom view. Media view is a good example. We've got the theme view. Perhaps I'm not understanding your question.
A use case would be if you needed to load the image and manipulate it, and you wanted to completely abstract that out from the rest of your project. So, for example, you need to say, filter it through Magic.
Okay.
None of the existing views really make that feasible without workarounds, abandoning a little bit of cake.
Okay, I think you could implement that as an extension to Media View, potentially, provide customization around that. If you wanted to pass through on each access, pass through ImageMagick before providing the data out. A subclass of Media View should be able to handle that. We can have a talk about that if you like, after this. Okay. Thanks very much.